And we're in. Welcome to the studio. Sam, how you doing today?
I'm good. I'm good. It's good to be here.
Thank you so much. So we're all rolling now. We had a little bit of a hiccup there, but we're back. So look, what we're talking about drugs today, right?
Yes, in a manner of speaking. So the book is Human History on Drugs. So obviously the drugs are important to it, but obviously it's also about the human experience and all of that. And I want the book to be something that can both entertain and educate readers. Obviously, when I think of edutainment, I think of things like Schoolhouse Rock, or I think of Duolingo. But this is its own form of edutainment, where I want it to be satisfying on a purely enjoyment-based level, but also genuinely informative, so they view it as delicious and nutritious.
Brilliant. I like that. Delicious and nutritious. So it's a nice little entertainment story. So what the book basically what catalogs like famous people who have done amazing things on drugs over the history of humankind?
Not I'm sorry about
No worries, Ross. It happens.
I did not realize that it was still on like that. I used to know how to turn my phone off.
It's okay. It happens from time to time.
There we go. Okay,
There we go.
okay, there we go.
There we go. My fault. I should have reminded you.
Yeah, I
So it's basically like a history of great human achievements that have been done on drugs or what?
Sort of. So some of the achievements there are great. Some of them are terrible, and some of them are people who achieved very impressive things, but whose lives fell apart because of drugs. So basically, the range is not to show. I don't want people coming away thinking either like, "Wow, drugs are awesome," or "Oh my God, drugs are terrible." What I actually want to have people come away thinking is there is a huge range of possible experiences here. It seems like drugs aren't inherently good or bad. These are more like tools. And so people can use these tools in ways that work well for them, or ways that don't work, or ways that work for one thing but have horrible side effects. Um and so it is about great things, terrible things, but generally historically significant things that were done by people who you don't really hear about a lot about it in the mainstream telling of the story, but these people were on drugs.
Mhm. And where did you get the idea for this?
I mean, I've always been fascinated by history,
Mhm.
so
You studied history at Stanford.
that's
Yeah,
correct.
yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I got my bachelor's degree in history at Stanford, but ever since I was a little kid, when I was in elementary school, I would ask my teacher if I could borrow their teacher's copy of the textbook, so I could look through and see all the extra like discussion questions and hey, here's stuff for further thought. I wanted to get that expanded look from a very early age, and my mom would come in to pick me up for school the next morning, and she'd see me passed out on the bed with the book still open on my chest because I've been up reading until I passed out. So I've always really liked the extra stuff
Mhm.
that you don't get in just the standard level of history. And I noticed while doing extra reading on a bunch of subjects that a lot of historical figures would have these there would be sentences in there, and I'd think, "Wait, why are they not following up on this?" Things like talking about Freud, for instance, I'd see that in the list of works he had, there would be something called Uber Coca in there, and I'm like, "Coca, as in the stuff they make cocaine out of." It's why are we just like gliding over this and skipping past this? This seems like could be very entertaining and fascinating,
Mhm.
but it's just not it's generally not considered to be part of, like, the standard Psych 101 curriculum. It's certainly not part of a high school psychology curriculum,
Mhm.
and so I didn't hear about that in a formal academic context, but I'm like, "This needs to be followed up further," and it turns out there are so many things where there are threads you can pull on, and it goes in incredibly strange directions that you wouldn't necessarily expect from how it's presented in a standard classroom.
I think all the stuff that we get in standard classrooms is pretty whitewashed, right? Like we don't get the real anything. I mean, every country has their own vision or version of what happened in history. And
Yes.
and in order for us to find anything truly unique or interesting, we have to do such a deep dive on our own. I mean, do you feel the same way having gone through, your undergraduate degree in history?
I think that's a very good point. So I was very lucky to have really fantastic history teachers throughout high school and even earlier, and then great great professors in college. So I was very fortunate to have really, really good like actual like historians and storytellers who were teaching me and giving me an appreciation for the extra stuff that was out there. But again, simply because you do have your curriculum, and if you're teaching in high school or any level below that, you obviously have your state standards, a whole thing that you have to get out there. And so it can be very, very difficult, even for very wise and very cultured teachers who know a lot of stuff beyond the basics, to actually get that, to fit that into your time in the classroom,
Mm.
because you are so limited and you already have to cram so much stuff into a small time. So I would say that just by necessity, even when they're not actively trying to censor or whitewash things, you inevitably get a much less complete and much more simplified version of history in classes, simply because they don't have time to get to all the good stuff.
Right. I mean, it's my personal opinion that probably most people in history who did really exceptional things, politicians, people who ran experiments, scientists, engineers, all they were probably all, in my mind, I think they're all like alcoholics, drug addicts, or sex addicts, like or and just power hungry maniacs. Like that kind of covers the spectrum in my mind.
Yeah, so people's lives are a lot more colorful and a lot more it's very easy, especially when it comes to figures who are seen as, oh, they're a giant of like science or mathematics or business, or if someone is a statesman or someone like that, it's very easy to just get the sort of PR version of what their background is like, and you end up with this very kind of dry, staid version of someone's life. And they could be doing stuff that is absolutely off the wall, but that you simply don't get in the, like, a good example of that would be, again, Freud. Like, Freud,
He's going to be coming back a lot in this, isn't he?
a lot of that, like, it was a revelation for me to realize that Freud loved cocaine, and he spent, like, 12 years doing cocaine pretty much every day, like, all the time, to the point where he genuinely did not believe that it was addictive because he never stopped doing cocaine, so he never really came down from it.
Really?
Yeah, and so when I saw that, it made a lot of things about, like, some of his stranger theories, how he had such absolute confidence in them and would defend them, like, so he defend them so vociferously and seem very convinced that he was right. It made a lot more sense realizing he was unbelievably coked out for a lot of this, and so I felt that it helped me understand his way of thinking
Mm.
when he was coming up with ideas like the Oedipus complex and penis envy, but they don't really tell you about that in the discussion of Freudian psychoanalysis that you get in most classrooms.
That's so funny because, if you've ever had the unpleasant experience of being around someone who's been on too much cocaine, you'll realize that they're incredibly confident.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's the confidence that is completely detached from any sense of reality. It's just, what I'm doing is a great idea. I feel very, very confident in this. I have lots of energy,
Yeah.
and I feel very good about myself. Clearly, what I'm saying is right. And of course, a lot of people around him might be looking at him askance, but of course, the cocaine has obliviated any sense of self-awareness temporarily. So it's not, I don't think that I sound crazy. I think that I sound ahead of the curve.
Ahead of the curve. Yes. That's brilliant. Okay, so we're gonna get into this a lot, but let's go back and learn a little bit more about you. So where are you from originally?
Yeah, so I was born and raised in Los Angeles. I am from LA, and lived in Brentwood for a lot of my life. I went to local public schools. I went to Palisades Charter High School, which unfortunately has burned down now.
How
But
crazy must that be?
it was wild seeing the, like, burnt out shells of places that I used to go in high school, and it's like, "Hey, I remember that from the non-blown up version of it." So that was very strange.
Did you have any friends or family that lost their homes during that?
Like, when you count, like, people I knew and family, friends, and such, like, 2 dozen people that we knew had homes burned down. Um, Pretty much the whole Palisades neighborhood was destroyed. So, it was surreal having that happen. But when I was there, I was fortunate to have to be at a beautiful campus where I had some really amazing history teachers, and I feel like I was very well prepared. When I did go off to Stanford for college, I felt extremely well prepared
Hmm.
in terms of just the habits of mind and like the level of diligence that my history teachers in high school had given me.
So where did this, I mean, where did this love of history come from? Like, were your parents really into history? Did you have like, some family friends or relatives that kind of introduced you to the magic of history? Like, because, you didn't just stumble upon this on your own, did you?
Well, yes and no. So I mean, it it helps that my family has always been a lot of big readers in my family. So there are always books flying around of interesting things. And I always, from a very, very early age, I always loved stories. I loved a good narrative. I loved hearing stuff that was fascinating to me. And so I was always looking for stuff to read. When I was little, I would read anything lying around. If there was nothing else lying around, I'd read like nutrition back facts or the back of a shampoo bottle. But I just liked absorbing information. And that was a trait that I kept for a long time. And my parents and my other family members would encourage that. They'd give me reading material on all kinds of stuff, both fiction and nonfiction.
Mm.
And I found that I really, really liked the like as much as I love fiction and I enjoy plenty of cartoons, video games, stuff like that, that's very much based in a world of fiction. But I also loved the fact that the historical stuff actually happened. It's like this is a true story. And I loved that whole true stories that are also really entertaining thing.
Mhm.
And that just became it became almost second nature that I would just seek out like, hey, if I can find a cool true story, why would I not want that? Why would I not want to find that?
Amazing, amazing. So then you go to high school in the Palisades, and I mean, what did you do? Just like absorb every history class you could get your hands on?
Yeah, so I was very much a history enthusiast. I was, in the various AP history classes, and I took, AP art history as well.
Mhm.
And I wrote for the school newspaper for 2 years. Again, part of the whole like collecting information and presenting it to the people. That was just a way of getting involved in gathering information. Like, oh, what's the world around me happening?
Mhm.
So all these things helped me build my interests in writing, in storytelling, and talking to people like that. And also, this was less of an academic thing, but I just liked telling crazy stories to people and seeing if I could get them to be enraptured by it and really see if I could get people to be interested in what I was saying.
Mhm.
And I would always feel this sort of extra sense of validation if I could finish it with, "And all that's true. It really happened."
Because it's part of a real history.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's part of real history. So the history stuff made for good just conversation
Mhm.
as well as an academic interest. It became both like obviously I wasn't going to cocktail parties as a high schooler, but the kind of thing that you think of as cocktail party chatter,
Mhm.
history makes for great stuff like that.
Yeah, I agree. And there's so many like interesting and unique characters that have existed and in so many difficult situations, right? And sometimes it just takes 50 or 100 years later for some historian to put together all the pieces of like what was actually happening at that time.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. Or even things like they might have private diaries during their life that never get published until after, they're gone, and those private diaries can tell you so many things. Or you can have I mean, there's certainly plenty of times where, for instance, where government programs like MK Ultra, where they tested psychedelics on the population, a lot of that stuff we had to wait for Freedom of Information Act type stuff to get the information out there. We had to wait for essentially we had to wait for all the people involved to either retire or die because they would definitely try and cover up what they did because a lot of it was insanely illegal and ethical.
Yeah.
But certainly, with the passage of time and with people no longer feeling the need to hide stuff because, well, this is in the past now, it's amazing what can come to light.
Yeah. No, I bet. So, okay, so you're at the Palisades High School.
Yeah,
You're a history buff. You're loving it.
yeah.
You're obviously doing very well in school. So, what made you choose Stanford?
Um, I've I really love California.
It's a great school. I mean, it's one of the
Yeah.
best schools in the country.
There was a lot going on. So it was I applied to a lot of schools in California. Most of my family lives in the state of California.
Mhm.
Um, and
Let's be honest, it's hard to leave once you get used to the sunshine.
no, yeah, there's just so much great stuff about it. And though, Stanford is esteemed for having an amazing history program, and it just had so many options. It was just such an opportunity that I thought, like, this is everything that I'm looking for. And I had a really fantastic college experience there. I mean, look, I don't think anyone's college experience is literally perfect. There are problems that there are anywhere, but I would say it was like 96, 97% positive.
That's amazing. So, okay, so I went to the University of Toronto.
All right.
I'm from Canada originally, and I took some history classes at
Yeah.
the University of Toronto. So I'm going back to my school days. So I had to take some history classes. So I had to take like a history of Canada. That was like
Makes sense.
mandatory.
Yeah.
And then I took a history of the United States, but I took like a modern history of the United States. So it was kind of like from the War of Independence onwards
Okay.
to today kind of thing. So it was like what from the 1750s, 1770s up until now.
Still a pretty broad period.
Yeah, and then I remember I took a Western European history which covered kind of the build up to the World War One, and then kind of carried through Europe up until like the 90s because that's when
Yeah.
I went to university. And then I took a history of modern China, which actually led
Oh,
me to
yeah.
go to China. So that was like China from 1949 to the 1990s when I was at school. So it kind of took me all through that. And I loved it because I think like studying history makes you want to see the world.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That
Did you study abroad at all?
Yes, yes. So that definitely was a big. It helps that everywhere has history, you know. So the choices that you have are pretty broad, and I was pretty good at writing those applications to study abroad. I was good at thinking of. It helped with all the historical fascination. It wasn't hard to think about things that were specific to different countries that I liked, and so I managed to. I studied abroad for 3 months in Florence, Italy, and in Oxford, England, and in Berlin, Germany.
Oh my God! What a
So
what a what a what a trio!
I know it was a pretty extraordinary experience, and I'm incredibly thankful that I was able to have that, and that with Stanford, it was all through the school, and you paid the same cost as if you were going to school on the home campus. So
Unbelievable.
they really that's an extraordinary thing that not very few people get that chance, and I was very fortunate to have that chance and be able to be living in all those places and seeing firsthand what it was like, experiencing the extraordinary culture and history, and eating a lot of good food, especially in Italy. A lot of good food there.
And let me guess. So Florence was art history, right? Because that city.
Heavily art history focused. Yeah, I had like two different art history classes there.
What a city, huh?
Oh, absolutely. Just so stunningly gorgeous. Uh, and I love Tuscan food. That cuisine is fantastic.
Yeah, get truffles.
Oh yeah, just the going into a grocery store there was just, walking into a land of wonders. Just seeing all these look at all these pastas and all these different ways. Oh, my cup runneth over. I was over the moon.
And no genetically modified anything.
Yeah, lots of organic stuff, lots of local stuff there. A lot of people who go to like the market like every day, so their stuff is really fresh. They were big on that like fresh local food scene in Italy.
So, I mean, I've met a lot of historians over the years, and I kind of put them into two different camps. Like, camp number one is the historian that always has their nose in a book and is like constantly reading and getting that kind of background um, from book knowledge, right? And then there's another historian that needs to be on the ground, needs to be in the location where the things happened that they're reading about, needs to be able to touch, and put themselves in a place to understand what it would have been like during that time, and I'm just wondering like where you see yourself in that, in which camp you see yourself. Because obviously you're a voracious reader. You told me
Yeah.
that you were reading everything from the age of like 3. But then also too, you had 3 great international experiences during your time at
Yeah.
Stanford.
Yeah, honestly, I like to try and be in both camps.
Mm.
I think that there's a tremendous value in broadening your horizons by reading, because reading can for so many people, especially if you don't have the means to travel, that can be such an amazing way to get invaluable knowledge about the world. But at the same time, if you have the ability to travel, I don't expect people to like live like Indiana Jones or something. I don't expect them to constantly be going into the middle of nowhere and trying to find artifacts from stuff. But certainly I think there's a huge value in actually going to the places that you read about and being able to put your knowledge into use. I find that it's a lot of fun once you know about a place to be able to go there and see like, oh, do I get these references? Do I know how to navigate? Do I know what foods are good? I find that those two things working together create such like a richer tapestry of human experience than they do individually. I'd say that it's great to read, but um if you can get the on the ground experience as well, I would say to get that. Absolutely.
Do you think like the internet and stuff has made us like lazy historians? Like, because you can go to Rome and not have read any history books, and then you can sit on the Spanish steps and be like, when were these built? And why were they built? And blah blah blah. And you can sit there while you're having a drink like everyone else, right? And you can figure it all out.
Yeah, I mean, yes and no, because on one hand, um, on one hand, it can be easier to access certain types of historical data, but at the same time, I think the idea that a much larger part of the populace can more easily access like basic facts about history, I think that's just a good thing. I think the problem comes when people think that because there is so much information out there and they have the internet, they jump to the conclusion that I must have read so much of this information. Now I'm a genius.
Yeah.
And so I think there's a lot of people who believe that because the potential exists
Mhm.
for them to be extremely knowledgeable about stuff, they think they actually are extremely knowledgeable about stuff because they read a tiny fraction of it.
Sure.
And so I would say that on one hand, it's if you have humility, then having the internet doesn't make you a more like doesn't make you a lazier historian because it can help you do research in ways that might be a lot more cumbersome. Certainly, I did a lot of research finding like actual books and biographies to to dig deeply into. I would initially find those sources on the internet. Like I would go to the Wikipedia article and see what did Wikipedia cite as their sources? What did they deem to be historically credible? And then I could dig into that.
Mhm.
Um, so if people have humility and patience and are willing to respect nuance, then I don't think it makes them lazier. But if people, want to take shortcuts, then I think it's very easy for the internet to give them the false illusion that they know more than they do.
Interesting. Interesting. Okay. So you've got this book out called Human History on Drugs. I've got a copy for us right there for anyone that wants to see it. Sam Kelly. So like okay, so you love history.
Yes.
Do you love drugs as well?
I wouldn't say that.
It's California though. We all dabble.
No, I mean it's like obvious. This is California. Cannabis is legal here. I've had a long history of health problems in my life, so I've taken a lot of medication over my life. Most of the medication I take is entirely like I would not be taking this if I hadn't been told to by a doctor.
Sure you will.
Um, I'm sure that no one wants to hear about my like IBS or high cholesterol, but you get the idea. I take a bunch of medications on a regular basis, and these have been very valuable to me in helping me live a normal and and useful and a life that I can genuinely appreciate and not feel weighted down by all kinds of negative things. Modern medicine has been hugely helpful to me, and I always thought it was kind of weird how a lot of people I talked to didn't seem to even comprehend the idea of like drug use existing at all before a certain point in time. A
Right?
lot of
Yeah.
people seem to think that people just started doing drugs in the 60s one day, or like even if they knew more, they'd be like absolutely shocked that like they'd hear about the opium wars in school and be shocked that opium was even a thing. And it's like, this is older than writing. Um,
So that was it then. So it was really like a desire to educate people that hey, drugs have a pretty interesting history beyond our knowledge, beyond our general knowledge, and these famous figures had interactions with these drugs.
Absolutely, yeah. Part of what I thought was strange was that, for me, because I had to deal with medical issues, so taking what would have been unfamiliar or unusual drug, like, I got used to that, and that became a normal part of my life, and it occurred to me, "Hey, this is just medication that actually these are tools that work well. There's not any inherent moral aspect to this,
Mhm.
but I felt like a lot of people, and I'm not saying a lot of people who are otherwise very intelligent and sophisticated had these very simplistic and basic views of drugs because they didn't see it as relevant to their lives. Or, I talked to someone who goes out and drinks every weekend and drinks coffee every morning, and they'd say, "Oh, I don't do drugs."
Mhm.
And it's like, well, actually you do. You don't realize that you're doing drugs, but this is very much so I wanted to challenge the notion that drug use is somehow not a part of the standard human condition. This is a very, very common thing.
That's interesting. This is a total aside, and I'm just going to go off into left field here.
Of course.
But I was listening to a podcast like a few years ago, and Hunter Biden,
Yeah.
Joe Biden's former President Joe Biden's son was on the podcast. And he was promoting a book,
Yes.
and it was about all of his drug use that it's quite public now.
Yes.
And so he went on, and he's a very interesting character. I mean, obviously, he's been involved in the public life for a
Yeah.
long, long time. Love him or hate him, but anyways, he's had massive drug addiction and substance abuse problems.
Yeah.
And he said that he has done every drug under the sun. Like he's tried absolutely everything. And he said the most dangerous drug he's ever touched was alcohol.
Alcohol is a very chemical, like it's the kind of thing that it is legal because it is so easy to make alcohol. Like you can get alcohol from like fermented berries or tree sap. Animals in nature can get drunk. So the fact that it's so ubiquitous and people have been drinking it forever makes it widely accepted. But if you think about the actual addictiveness of it, you can die from withdrawals from addiction to alcohol alone. Unless you have like a severe autoimmune disease, you can't die from addictions alone from like amphetamines or cocaine.
Mhm.
So it is a very severe addiction once you develop it. The effects are very potent. It acts on the same, receptors as benzodiazepines and Ambien and a bunch of much harder drugs. So yeah, alcohol is by any measure a hard drug, but it is so widely accepted that you can order it. I mean, you wouldn't go to a fancy restaurant and see someone order like a plate of cocaine. That would just be unthinkable. But you can absolutely see someone go to a fancy restaurant and have everyone order like a high end drink.
Sure, absolutely, yeah. I mean, I was filming a few years ago. I was filming in Poland, and I went to this bar, and I was chatting with this bar owner, and I had three totally different bottles of vodka that was made from potato.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like for fermenting potato, no problem. Like you're right, alcohol is so easy to make and it's so prevalent everywhere that if they didn't legalize it, everyone would just be doing it behind everyone's back.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That was the whole thing with prohibition, and then even earlier, there was that whole whiskey rebellion shortly after
Mm.
the American Revolution because hey, all these grain farmers, how do they how do they get the most bang out of their buck from grain that will eventually go bad? You distill it, you turn it into whiskey.
Mhm.
And so this is just it's such an accepted part of the economic systems and our social order and all that other stuff that we ignore that it has very much like hard drug type effects, hard drug levels of addictiveness, and of course the amount of violence and accidents associated with alcohol is astronomical. But it's well, I think rightly, most Americans would consider the idea, and indeed, in most places where it is legal to drink, I think we'd consider it absurd to not have it be legal to drink there.
Mhm.
Um, but obviously, there are plenty of other countries in the world where alcohol is demonized and viewed very much as a hard drug due to the cultural sensitivities over there.
Yeah. Like I was in Saudi Arabia a couple years ago too.
Yeah.
And so they've obviously banned alcohol in Saudi Arabia. And it was actually like really nice. Like you could go out for dinner at night and you wouldn't see people like being intoxicated in public. And that was actually like quite nice because I spend a lot of time in Europe. I spend a lot of time in North America. Like you go out for dinner, 9 o'clock, you're out, and there's always people who are drinking too much and being really, really loud.
Yeah.
And it was kind of nice not to be around that at all. But then on the flip side of that, I love having a drink in the evening and making that part of my like end of day ritual.
Yeah. Like it seems like I wouldn't necessarily want to live in a place that tried so hard to deny a basic fact about what human beings are like and what they do. Um, it seems I it seems like it's I understand why it's disapproved of there, but that is going in, it's like if you can harm someone with a nail clipper, you don't ban all nail clippers, right? And say that that's
Yeah.
so I definitely feel like when people are banning not just the dangerous ways of using it, but just throwing out the baby with the bathwater,
Mhm.
then that I feel like is going too far. I'm not a big fan of outright prohibitions or just in every circumstance ever, people should use this. I'm generally a proponent of the view that things have time and places, and some things have more times and more places than others, and some things have very, very few. But I generally don't agree that we should either be just 100% all in on most drugs, but nor do I agree that we should oppose them unnecessarily, even if there can be quality of life type stuff that makes it seem reasonable in certain circumstances. I definitely think that it's very easy to exploit that.
Absolutely, yeah. And just as another little aside, because it's in the news at the moment, Iran, and Israel are
Yeah,
fighting back and forth, and, but Iran was one of the biggest, winemakers in the world,
they were.
before 1979, and that, like, and everyone in there, all the Persians and that whole culture was very much into wine drinking.
Oh no, yeah, there was a lot more. Yeah, I know. I mean, places like Shiraz that had absolutely fantastic grapes and were known for producing, like back during the days of the Silk Road, these were extremely valuable trade products. These are
Absolutely.
things that are historically attested to that were inspirations to places that are now big winemakers. But then you get a government that is very fanatically religious that comes in and says, yeah, alcohol is a sin now. If you make it, will kill you. So now they have a lot of high quality grape juice there.
Go figure.
Yeah. It's like, well, there's an age-old art that's pretty much wiped out because the government is overly paranoid about alcohol.
Yeah, not easy. Okay, so you're fresh out of Stanford, right? You've got your history degree. Did you do any master's programs? Like, I'm just trying to figure out like how you got from graduating to writing your book.
Yes. So interestingly, like I said, I'd always loved the storytelling and the history, and I'd had great history teachers. And so I was thinking, well, what is the best way to get this knowledge to people? And I think maybe I should be a teacher. And so I was actually in a master's degree program for half a year at the University of Pennsylvania to get a master's in education.
Oh, you went to the East Coast.
Yeah. So for a while, I didn't finish the program because while I was there, I kind of realized some stuff where maybe this isn't the ideal method for me personally to um to share my love of history. 'Cause I just want to say it is so hard to be a teacher.
Oh,
Um,
it's miserable.
the amount of extra work you have to do that you do not get paid for or otherwise compensated for is extraordinary. No one makes those syllabus. No one makes your syllabus. No one writes your lesson plans. No one. All you get is like some very loose state standard, and it's like, yeah, teach this to kids somehow. You get these very loose guidelines, and then of course there's all the people. See, it's like you have to memorize about say 150 names so that you know all your kids' names, and then you got to grade all these papers, and you got to make sure that you're hitting all the stuff in the state standards. So by the time you can actually talk about like extra stuff beyond that, the kind of stuff that this book is pretty much all stuff beyond the state standards, there's almost no time for it. And you're already doing so much other work that is full of, and especially nowadays, there's so much politics and culture war stuff that gets added to the already large amount of red tape that I admire people who are in the trenches, like who are doing the teaching jobs that are vital to our society, because those people are working hard, but that just wasn't for me. So I decided that I was not going to complete the master's degree, and I would try and figure out, well, how else can I reach people? And for a while, I I was just sort of like in my free time, I would write stuff about various subjects that I was interested in, post it online, just sort of like I don't know, just a way to kill some time. But people started bringing those things to me and saying, "Sam, this is good. You could write a book like this," and that gets me thinking I could, and so like 6 or 7 years later, here we are.
6 or 7 years. It's a long time, right? It takes a long time to like formulate these ideas in your head and like
Yeah,
really push them forward.
yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, how did you come to this decision that like you were gonna talk about basically the human history on drugs?
Yeah, so I wrote about a lot of different historical subjects when I was just sort of writing things to get my like I don't know what was it like history storytelling fix after I dropped out of the master's in education program. Um, and so a lot of those things ended up being about the stuff that you don't really hear about as much in your curriculum, like the wilder side of history. And it ended up being that a lot of those things were drug related. And
Really?
yeah, like I started finding more like the stuff like the Freud thing and stuff like, oh, hey, it turns out that Nietzsche wasn't actually a doctor. Like he wasn't a medical doctor, but he had a doctorate. And so he just kept going to the pharmacy and saying, yes, I have a prescription for chloral hydrate and for opium from me, Dr. Nietzsche. And they're like, well, you're a doctor. You clearly know the truth. It's like
He was writing his own
he
prescriptions.
was writing his own prescriptions despite not actually being a medical doctor.
Wow.
Like, hearing about stuff like that was really entertaining,
Mhm.
or stuff about how, it's like, "Oh, I like Mexican Coke. I often buy Mexican Coke." Um, and so learning that Coke all over the world still contains the alkaloids from actual coca leaves that they've simply extracted the cocaine from and then sold that cocaine to a medical company in New Jersey. Like, learning all these weird things, it made it clear that, hey, I have a lot of drug related like wild and crazy history here. This is a theme. This is a theme right here.
Mhm. Yeah, and it's interesting because drugs have such I mean, obviously, I guess you're writing for the US audience, you're writing in English, you're an American. So, America has such a strange relationship with drugs, right?
Yes.
Because you've had prohibition, you've had the war on drugs, you've had this kind of massive like escalation of the Mexican cartels, you've got movies and TV shows like Narcos on Netflix and all these other things which are kind of dramatizing
Yeah.
the lives of drug dealers. So it's a ripe environment to tell stories about drugs and how drugs have come into our
Yeah.
everyday lives.
No, absolutely. There's a lot of cultural interest, and there's also a lot of sensationalism and hype, and so it's good to be able to present these stories are totally wild, but they are also true.
Mhm.
So that is a I try and avoid the sensationalism because frankly the stories don't need it. Like it honestly like it detracts from the things that are just over the top crazy
Uh-huh.
trying to embellish anything else. So I find that where it's just that putting the actual facts out there is oftentimes so shocking that it's more effective than trying to get people thinking, oh, this is going to be so telling it like it is will often hit people harder.
Right. Okay, so you're 6 or 7 years out of school. You're writing down all these kind of like small short stories and like antidotes and all these things you're finding
Yeah.
interesting. You start showing them around to people. People start saying, "Hey, this is a book. Like you should write a book about this maybe."
Yeah.
So when do you start like putting pen to paper and actually start writing this book?
Um, so again, some of the stuff that I'd written beforehand were sort of like proto chapters that later ended up in the like very early forms
Mhm.
of things that ended up in the book. So I had some stuff already there, but then there was a huge process of like, okay, once I try and establish who I'm writing the chapters on, and then once I get that down, I would look to make sure that I could find a lot of information on them. And if I could actually find a lot of information on them, then I would write first drafts that usually had to be cut down afterwards. But these would be I would find really promising sources and I would write a bunch of stuff on them. And a lot of times I would have more than enough for an entry in the book. And that was how I do it. I would just travel around looking for names and stories that like things that seemed interesting to me, look up historical figures that I thought were interesting and see, was there anything like this here? Um, it was
So you started your research for the book by trying to find historical figures first, and then doing like a deep dive to see if they had like a history of drug use or drug addiction.
so parts of it were ones that I already know
Hmm.
they were using drugs, and then others were ones who just I don't know, they had like some unusual traits or seemed like a bit eccentric, and I was thinking, it seems like a possibility. Let's look into this and see if there's anything there at all.
Yeah.
And a lot of times there would be other explanations for why they were eccentric or strange. But then sometimes it would be, oh no, no, this person like either it's clear they did a lot of drugs or their life circumstances were such that it would be almost impossible for them to not be doing a lot of drugs.
Wow, that's wild. So, I mean, like, did you shop the book around? Like, did you try to get a publisher and stuff like that? Did you try to get an agent? Like, I'm just curious, like, what the initial conversations were like on the business side of like, writing a book about the history of people and drug use.
Yeah, yeah. So it was kind of a stretched out process. It helped that I got like very early on. I actually managed to get to make contact with an agent. And so obviously, there's plenty of horror stories about agents who are like, oh, they're taking you under their wing, but they want to exploit you. This was not like that. This
Yeah.
was someone who genuinely thought like this book has a lot of potential, but you don't really have an established profile now. So in order to establish yourself, you're gonna have to go onto TikTok. The TikTok apparently is where a lot of the people were who would buy this. So I got a TikTok and I started making like these little like punchy videos that would like share short versions of these anecdotes. And sometimes I managed to make out of one individual story, I've managed to get multiple anecdotes. Sometimes I would look someone up and write a script, and then from that I'd start doing more research. And so a TikTok would turn into a chapter. Sometimes chapters would turn into TikToks, but I would use this, and I started gaining more and more of an audience, and eventually I got to over 100,000 followers. I got gosh, like millions of likes and stuff like that. And so it became clear that okay, there was an audience for this. And once I showed my agent that, he's like, okay, good. Now that you've got this established, now we can, try and get you published in some stuff with the articles and say, look, here's this TikTok personality, Sam Kelly. You've seen he's popular here. Here's some articles from him. And then finally it gets to the point where okay, so here's this TikTok personality, Sam Kelly. He's gotten several articles published. So, hey, publishers, do you think this is like a good book idea? And so, but it's a lot of steps.
That's
It's
ridiculous.
a many step process.
So, being a historian from Stanford and deciding to dedicate months or years of your life to writing a book was not a good enough profile for a publishing agent. They wanted you to become a TikTok influencer just in
They
order to
want
sell
to know
your
that I
book.
had a market. Like, I mean, because there's plenty of people who,
It's all backwards now. It's all fucked up.
to be fair, there's plenty of people who have really good ideas but aren't great at marketing them. And certainly there's a lot of things where a lot of academic writing is very well done from a technical perspective,
But
but
shit boring.
it gets read by an extremely tiny audience because it's not really calibrated to be read by anyone else other than people reading academic journals. Um, and so, honestly, I considered it fortunate that, like, if I was working in academia, I'd have to spend years and years writing papers that would get a tiny fraction of the audience base, and I'd have to get like a PhD. I'd have to go through all these hoops and get approved by my department. So,
But then you could write your own prescriptions.
given how it ended up for Nietzsche, I would not recommend taking that path.
Maybe not. Maybe not.
He ended up going insane from that.
We're all gonna go insane at some stage.
Yeah, yeah, but he went like locked in an asylum, thinking that he's Jesus and Napoleon and the Buddha insane. So more so than the average person.
Come back and find me in 10 years.
Uh,
I'll be right there. I'll be right there.
yeah.
Anyways, sorry. So So the but having the YouTube audience, having that marketing in place,
So
kind of
yeah.
got the project over the line.
Yeah, yeah, no. Once I'd shown that, like, okay, there's people on these social media platforms who will like your stuff, and there's people, like there are publications that will print your writing. There are people who want to see what you have to say, and so that was enough to that was enough to see, like, okay, is this writing worthwhile? And I was very fortunate that a lot of people thought the subject matter was fascinating,
Yeah.
and they liked how I wrote. So
Yeah, I mean, the moment the email came in to meet you and to do this chat, I was like, humans and the history of drugs, like, yeah, let's fucking do it. Like, I'm
yeah.
I'm super interested in this topic because I know literally nothing about it.
Yeah, no, it definitely, there were a lot of people who were open to the ideas, but just wanted to see that see that I was, like, a reliable person to bank on
Mhm.
and, like, put a bunch of money and time into, because certainly it's been a very involved and I've gotten a lot of really amazing support from my publishers, but just the amount of emails between so many people that are involved, this is a big undertaking, and it's a whole team that's put this book together. Like, I'm the main writer, but it's a whole team that's responsible for this actual product, the book here.
Mhm.
Um, so I can understand what they wanted to see, like, can we trust this guy to actually get this book, like, to make this book worthwhile?
Mhm.
But I'm like, so far it's worked out very well. I'm hoping that it continues to work out so well, you know?
Sure. No, it's amazing. So, okay, so how did you decide to structure the book? How many chapters are there, and how have you kind of divided the chapters, and what are, like, what can we expect if we do a deep dive?
Yes. So the book is mostly in chronological order. Some of these things happen around similar times, but it's generally chronological. And I broke the books into a few sections that have, like, fun subheadings based on when they occurred. So for instance, you've got uh
Yeah, give me some examples.
yeah, the table of contents has things like there's like wartime fogginess, modern mystics, like different time periods labeled with different things to group together different types, like the um
Take me back to some, like, ancient historical, chapter you put, like, what give me an example from back then.
oh yeah, so we've got the Oracle of Delphi, Qin Shi Huangdi, we got Alexander the Great, we've got Marcus Aurelius, actually.
Oh, really? The Roman Empire.
Yeah, yeah, Marcus Aurelius, the meditations guy, the stoicism, the champion of stoicism, the true philosopher king.
Was he high all the time?
No, no, that's the thing. So people always think of him as, like, the epitome of sober-minded thinking. It's that whole, it's almost like a cliche, like, yes, to improve myself, I read the Meditations of Marcus Aurelius,
Mhm.
and it changed my life.
Well, I always see the Marcus Aurelius things on social media, like, everyone's coming up and giving these, like, little Marcus Aurelius quotes, right?
Oh yeah, no, he was seen as being an incredibly wise and successful leader of Rome. But the thing was, he couldn't turn his brain off. He would always be thinking about stuff. So it'd be the middle of the night, and he'd be wide awake thinking about stoicism, right? And so his doctor had prescribed him opium to sleep. And so he wasn't otherwise super big into drugs, but he did take opium pretty much every single night in order to get to bed. And that was part of the range that I wanted to show. You have someone like Alexander the Great, who dies at 32 because he is just constantly drinking really heavily and doing tons of opium and just generally partying really hard. And that's one example of, like, ancient substance use.
And he was one of the greatest military conquerors of all
One of the
time.
great conquerors. Yeah.
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 He died at 32. I didn't know that.
Yeah, no, Alex, and he never lost a battle against anyone else. It was just against himself that he lost the battle, because he couldn't stop himself from drinking and doing opium until his immune system was shot, and he died of disease in Nebuchadnezzar's palace in Baghdad on the way back from his conquest in India.
Wow. I
Yeah.
I did not know how he died like that.
So yeah, there's people like who go way over the top, like Alexander the Great, but also people like Marcus Aurelius, who was pretty much just using drugs as recommended by a doctor for medical purposes only.
Mhm.
And that's
Does
the
does opium really help you sleep?
well, it can. I wouldn't recommend it long term, and it is not the most effective sleep aid out there, but it does cause sleepiness in a lot of people. And at the time that he was living, it was the most effective thing that they knew of that
Mhm.
could help you sleep.
Milk of the poppy.
Yeah, exactly. That was pretty much like, yes, poppy juice, milk of the poppy. Like names like that were generally considered like, hey, this is one of the few pharmaceuticals we actually know of that has actual medical effects and doesn't cause you to like, I don't know, like defecate your organs out or something like that.
Yeah. We could have taken this podcast to the next level if we just brought a bunch of drugs in and tried them all.
That would go very badly. I mean,
Terrible.
you got like the Jin Shi Huang Di doing the drinking mercury to try and live forever in the book.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah, no, that's a whole thing. There's a whole category actually on Wikipedia. One thing that I loved was in doing the research, there was an entire category of list of people who have died from Chinese alchemical elixir poisoning. It's
Oh,
a
really?
it's a very specific thing, and like all these different emperors and high-ranking officials throughout the history of China have died in efforts to create potions that will make you live forever, but that are based on like very archaic norms of traditional medicine, including one that basically says, okay, mercury is really, really cool. Like, look at it. It's like a metal that flows. Therefore, it obviously has like mystical properties. And so they would just try and get, Qin Shi Huang Di would order his alchemists to make these mercury potions for him. And of course, drinking that just ended up killing him ultimately from mercury
Right.
poisoning.
Yeah.
But
That's the
they
thing.
kept doing that because a lot of people were like, listen, I'm sure the alchemist didn't get the recipe exactly right, but I bet you if we keep doing this, we'll get it at some point. Like,
And it just killed hundreds of people?
I'm not sure if it was hundreds, but certainly dozens of high ranking officials.
Some
And,
important people.
and so some of them were emperors died from this. So a lot of very important people died because they tried to live forever by drinking mercury potions.
Wow. Okay. That's interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, people try to live forever today, right? By medicating and kind of zoning out and doing whatever they need to
People
do.
do a lot of strange things to try and live forever. As far as I'm aware, no one's managed to pull it off yet. So,
It's a small, it's a small group of zero people.
yeah. Yeah.
That's wild. I had no idea all these Chinese officials and emperors were trying to live forever by drinking mercury. That just makes no sense.
Yeah, I think it had something to do with like the same kind of the, the same basic methodology that has various like endangered animals' body parts being trafficked to like wealthy crime lords in China because they believe that like, oh, if I have this white rhino horn, it will make me more virile or something like
Oh,
that.
that's big in China. Yeah.
So I think it's some kind of symbolic traditional medicine type thing where people were willing to try this thing that's like, okay, sure. Like it seems like it just kills everyone who does it. Maybe we're just not doing it right. So it
Right.
definitely seems like there's a certain basis of like faith and superstition in there that is pushing people to try stuff even after they know it's probably a bad idea.
Mhm.
But it's just like, would all these esteemed emperors really be so stupid? Like, no, surely not. Like, they can't have been wrong. Therefore, it's like this can't have been. Yeah, again, a lot of people will will just look at it's like, oh, you know what? Like, I'm sure this isn't a problem because it's culturally accepted, right? So,
That's crazy. No, China's an interesting place. I lived in China for 18 years, and
oh,
it's wild. Like you can hear stories of like people buying like a gallbladder of a bear, because it's supposed to make you more sexually potent. Or
yeah,
and one time actually I was even in Tibet. I was hiking in the mountains of Tibet, and we came across a village, and all the villagers were up in the mountains picking out this little like worm that they pull out of the ground. And if you can, and there's a season for it, and it kind of looks like a little like a stick or a twig, but you pull it out and you dry them.
yeah.
And what they do is they ship them to Eastern China and they mix them with something else and they give them to men. And again, it's for sexual potency. But the value of those little worms that they're pulling out of the ground in Tibet was the same price per pound as like gold.
Oh no, yeah, it's incredible. If there's a sense that something has this value, then there are certain collectors who will just pay exorbitant prices for them,
Mhm.
regardless of what mainstream medicine says. Because no, it's like my guy tells me that this is good stuff,
Mhm.
and so it's And again, it's like maybe they have a doctor who does not subscribe to like what we consider to be mainstream modern medicine, and so they've got a doctor telling them, "Oh no, yeah, this is a good idea."
Mhm.
Because it is striking the kind of, and that's one theme seeing in the book, the kind of stuff that used to be used for medicine before people realized that it had negative effects.
Like what?
Well, the mercury is a good example, but also just the fact that, like opium, it used to be that you could just get that over the counter in the form of laudanum. So laudanum is opium, suspended in alcohol, like opium in preserved in alcohol that is now active simply by drinking it.
Are you serious? They had opium that you can drink like that?
Yeah, yeah, and that used to be in the 19th century, you could go into pretty much any pharmacy and buy that over the counter. Like they would have recommendations on like, "Hey, this is great if your baby has a sore throat. Like, just drop some of this opium and alcohol mixture down your baby's throat." And until um
That'll shut it up.
yeah, no, it was they just used this for everything, for a lot of the 19th century, and especially in Britain, a lot of Victorian authors, like a good example of one is Samuel Taylor Coleridge, who was really into it, were just pretty much constantly like high off of the opium and alcohol laudanum mixture, um, and that was just seen at for a long time. There were no limitations on this. Just like kids could walk in and buy it. It didn't. Um,
It's better than going and getting a candy bar.
I mean, pretty much it was
Huh.
it was shocking to realize just how easily obtainable these things were, or, I mean, this isn't in the this isn't directly in the book, but it is mentioned in there. Because again, it used to be that cocaine wine was a normal thing that was a popular beverage. To give you an idea, so
Cocaine and wine.
cocaine-infused wine, like wine that you drink and it also gives you the effects of cocaine.
Really?
Yeah, and to give you an idea of how widely accepted this was, so, and this was actually in the news recently, so not the current pope. The current pope is Pope Leo XIV, right?
From Chicago.
From Chicago. Yeah, first Chicago style pope. Anyways, so he obviously named himself after another highly esteemed, respected pope i- in the hierarchy, Pope Leo XIII. Leo XIII is in my book. Leo XIII loved cocaine wine. You have to consider that this was the 19th century. So at the time, it was like Thomas Edison drank cocaine wine, Ulysses S. Grant drank cocaine wine. Um, uh, who else was it?
They put cocaine in Coca-Cola.
That was the thing. Coca-Cola was originally a knockoff of this cocaine wine beverage. Was it? So the original one was this thing called Vin Mariani, and Pope Leo XIII loves Vin Mariani so much. He says, keep in mind that he was pope from when he was like in his 70s to like his 90s. So he was old, and yet of 300 encyclicals, like these big doctrine documents in the history of the Catholic Church, this one guy wrote 80 of them.
Oh, wow.
Um,
Prolific.
very prolific. Um, and again, he was, given that he's the namesake for the current pope, he was clearly a very highly respected theologian. And this guy loved the cocaine wine so much, he said it, quote, "It fortifies me when prayer is insufficient." He gave a Vatican gold medal to the creator of the wine, and then appeared in a full-page advertisement showing the Pope endorsing the wine that is in my book. We included the
Oh
actual
my
ad
god.
in the book. And so, yeah, back at that time, that was all considered totally normal. And again, this pope is still highly regarded enough that when the new pope was choosing his name, everyone was like, yes, this makes a good impression. Name it after Pope Leo XIII, the cocaine wine guy.
The cocaine wine pope.
I'm pretty sure they didn't refer to him as that at the conclave. I'm pretty sure they would refer to him for his other achievements.
Mhm.
But that was a big thing. Like, how do you think he was so energetic, even though he starts when he's like in his mid 70s?
And wrote 80 of those documents out of like 300 or whatever. He was
Church. Yeah, like,
prolific.
absolutely. Yeah,
Cocaine wine burning the midnight oil.
absolutely. And so that was a normal trade good at the time. And it was still normal enough that so, you've got an American who tries making a knockoff. You got John Pemberton calling it Pemberton's French wine coca. But then an early version of prohibition comes down in Georgia, where Pemberton lives, and Pemberton's like, "What do I do?" Because his wine's got it's got caffeine and it's got cocaine. and it's got alcohol, right? So he's like, I've got it. He removes the alcohol and calls it Coca-Cola, the temperance drink.
Wow.
Like, it's still got the cocaine and the caffeine in it, but it doesn't have the wine anymore. So now it's temperance friendly.
So they were worried more about the alcohol than about the cocaine.
Worrying about the cocaine came later. That was like, like a decade or so later. And then they eventually had to remove that as well. But even to this day, their supply chain still involves extracting the alkaloids from the coca leaf. And then they sell the cocaine to one of the few legal they still have medical cocaine for certain ear, nose, and throat surgeries in the United States. And so the small amount of that cocaine comes from the stuff that is extracted and then sold by Coca-Cola so that the drink doesn't have that particular illegal alkaloid in it. But the rest of the stuff that causes like the numbing and soothing sensations of coca leaves, that's all still in Coke. That's why Coke has that distinctive mouthfeel that like no other soft drink can really match
Mhm.
because they're using coca leaf alkaloids that no one else can legally obtain.
That's wild.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was in Peru. I was filming in Peru a couple years ago, and we were doing a pretty tough like 10-day trek, and all the guides were chewing coca leaves.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and I was like, hey guy, like I asked my guide, I was like, hey, what are you chewing? He's like, oh, we're chewing on coca leaves. We can buy them by the bag down in the villages. The farmers, they go up into the hills and they collect them and stuff like that. And I'm like, but what does it taste like? And he goes, it's not cocaine. Like you have to mix it with a few other things to get cocaine. But he goes, but if you chew the coca leaves, it's kind of like a caffeine infusion. So it kind of like gives you a bit of energy and it gives you something to focus on in like chewing in your mouth. So it kind of gets you out of your own head when you're doing like boring farm work or hiking in the mountains.
Yeah, it staves off altitude sickness,
Well, yeah.
like not need to eat quite as often. It's really useful if for the people. I mean, it's obviously a ancient part of the ancestral culture of the people who live in that region of South America is the coca leaf. And then I mean the big just the weird part for the coca leaf comes from when it stops being used just for those traditional purposes, and Europeans start realizing that, hey, this stuff is like maybe like these leaves are like 5% cocaine at most. What if we just extract the cocaine and get pure cocaine and use that? And so that was a scientific curiosity during the 19th century. And so that's why Freud had all this cocaine because as a respected guy in the medical community at the time, he could literally just write to pharmaceutical companies and say, "Hello, I would like a free sample of your cocaine, please." And they just send it to him.
Mm.
Like, it seems crazy now, but they were sending him like insanely pure medical grade cocaine. And he just had so much of it that he genuinely didn't think it was addictive because he never really ran out.
That's amazing. I mean, were there any prolific thinkers or theologians or inventors, who weren't just high all the time?
Oh, I mean, yeah, yeah. There's still plenty of people who weren't high all the time. It just that there's more than you think were high a lot. Um, but I don't want to make it seem like, oh, everyone in the world who's ever achieved anything was on drugs. Um, it's more like, hey, these people have a huge range of interests. These people do all kinds of stuff in their lives, and sometimes these lives are a lot wilder than you might think they are.
Sure. And I mean, like, these guys are writing books, they're writing papers, they're, changing the way we know and understand ourselves. I mean, but they're working like these are guys that are awake like 20 hours a day, and you wonder how.
Yeah, no, some of the people who have the more unusual work hours like that,
Hmm.
um, consume an ungodly amount of pharmaceuticals. And some people were just very high energy. Um, like one thing that I always find somewhat interesting is that by all accounts, um, Salvador Dali was not super into drugs. He's not in the book.
Hmm.
Um, like you'd think he would be.
Yeah, his art is ridiculous.
Yeah, I think for the most part he was just kind of like that. And there's several people who it seems like are very, very strange, but they're just kind of like that. And so their drug use is not a guaranteed thing. And honestly, for some of them, Van Gogh was one of them where it didn't even occur to me initially that what he was doing. Van Gogh ate paint.
He ate paint.
He actually like, when I first heard that, I thought it was a mean-spirited joke about Van Gogh being, mentally disturbed, but then I'm like, "Wait, I wonder if there's official documents." So I go on the actual website for the Van Gogh Museum in Amsterdam, and they have a frequently asked questions page there, and one of the first questions there is, "Hey, so I heard Van Gogh ate paint. Is that true?" And it says, "Yes, Van Gogh frequently did consume the paint he used in his work. His favorite flavor was yellow paint."
What?
Yes. So he actually did eat paint, and at one point had to be stopped from drinking a bottle of turpentine. Um,
Jesus.
yeah.
And I mean, paint back then, it was probably like lead
Oh, there was
infused.
definitely lead in that paint.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, there's stuff like that where if he wasn't already mentally disturbed, I don't think it would have even occurred to him to try and use paint as a drug
Hmm.
because who does that? I mean, obviously, I know that I've heard of huffing paint, but it's pretty much just giving yourself brain damage.
Yeah.
So it just didn't occur to me that someone would do that. But then, but again, like knowing what I know about Van, it's like, okay, unfortunately, this actually kind of makes sense because the guy just did not have good control of his mind.
That's wild. And yellow paint was his favorite. And that's part of the FAQ on the Van Gogh Museum website in Amsterdam.
And you notice that in his work, he loves having canvases that are absolutely splashed with yellow paint, like yellow
Really?
everywhere. So it's like it's very prominent in his artwork that he loves the color yellow and uses it a lot. And it's like, yeah, that's not just an aesthetic thing. He also likes to eat the paint.
Wow. What a wild story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of thing. There's some people who on what there's people who it seems like, oh, they'd have to be on drugs, and you look it up and it's like, wait, really? They were just weird?
There's a lot of weird people.
And there's other people who, like, they do drugs that most people wouldn't even think of to do, and that's probably because they were already kinda strange.
Yeah. This is an interesting topic right now, actually, because I don't know if you've seen this debate that's going on on social media these days, but I think the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal both recently published stories that Elon Musk is a drug user and he was using like ketamine and stuff like that. And he just published his drug toxology report, and it's negative for all tested drugs in the United States. And he just came out to prove to himself that, hey, like he's a genius, a rocket science, electric car guru, but he's not a drug user.
Yeah, I don't think we're actually gonna know the truth about Elon Musk's drug use, um, until after he's gone and we see his, like, documents. I don't wanna speculate on Elon Musk's drug use and what he is
Yeah.
or isn't doing. Um,
It's funny that this is like just in the news now though. Like you imagine like around the time of Freud, if there was like all these rumors going around about how Freud was using drugs, but no one actually approached him, or maybe someone tried to get something in the media. Like it's funny like that these kinds of stories still come out about people who are thinking outside the box.
yeah, although there are some differences in that Freud did not try and hide the fact that he was super into cocaine. Like, whatever the truth may be, Elon Musk is claiming that he is not as into this stuff as people are saying he is, and so whereas like Freud would routinely prescribe cocaine to his patients, it didn't go well in a lot of cases because it turns out that a lot of his patients didn't really need to be coked out. Um,
That can't help. I like that can't help every patient.
Yeah, no, like, there was one guy who, again, because Freud didn't think that cocaine was addictive, right? Because he always had super high grade cocaine and never ran out of it, and just he would, as soon as he started to feel himself flagging, he would just re up and dose again. So he was just always be on. So he had a friend who was addicted to morphine, and he decides the way he's going to cure his friend's morphine addiction is that he's going to have the friend replace all the morphine with cocaine and then just stop cold turkey because he's like, look, cocaine's not addictive, right? This will
Wow.
go fine. This will be totally fine. And so, anyways, the guy does this and he goes insane from going cold turkey on cocaine.
Mhm.
And I think he eventually commits suicide. So,
Wow.
so Freud did not super hard try to hide the fact that he was really into cocaine.
Mhm.
He would actively encourage other people to do it. So definitely there's
Sounds like a great doctor.
yeah, that's the thing. Yeah, Freud was like not an amazing doctor. Like he had some very groundbreaking ideas, but he was like I think in my book I actually say Freud was a pretty crappy doctor. Like
prescribing cocaine to get people off of heroin is a new one. I've never heard that before.
Yeah, no, it was he ha
And then the patient died.
I think he technically he went insane and then eventually killed himself, so it's like he died with extra steps, like, um
Extra steps is good.
yeah, yeah, so that's
Not easy. Not easy. Okay, so so can you give me like a what's a modern day example of someone that we might know who did yeah, amazing things on drugs? Like you talked about Marcus Aurelius, we talked about Freud, talked about Alexander the Great.
yeah.
Do you have a modern day?
So a good example of that would be Steve Jobs. So Steve Jobs, he what I love is that I think this was actually mentioned on he certainly admitted to doing both cannabis and LSD on an official government release form because in order to get security clearance for some stuff that Apple was doing with the government, Steve Jobs had to fill out forms that among other things asked him, "So, have you ever done, recreational drugs? If so, what have you done?" And so he says, "Yeah, so back in the day, I used to smoke a lot of pot, but what I really liked doing was LSD.
Mhm.
I got to tell you, he says that LSD was one of the two or three most important things he did in his life.
Mhm.
And it helped him with his design sense, like that whole Apple aesthetic that made them so successful. Like one good example of this was that so Steve Jobs did not invent the graphical user interface, right? But he he picked it up when his competitors wouldn't use it. So some competitors of him, I think it might have been Hewlett Packard, they developed the idea of what if instead of just having text in a screen, there's like little icons? Like what if when someone wants to throw away a file, it's like a little picture of a trash can, right? And they look at that and they're like, no, no, this is too childish and gimmicky. This is like some kind of cutesy sit and spell gimmick. Like we're not, what are we gonna do? Like, and so they decided not to do that. But Steve Jobs, who is, he has had his mind opened by LSD, and now he believes that he can think different. He sees this graphical interface, and he's like, we can create a whole world inside the computer screen. It's like there will be a whole zone where they interact, and yes, we'll put the pictures there, and people will come to be able to read the pictures as words, and they threw away an opportunity, but we're gonna take this. And that becomes a huge hit. Like, who nowadays can imagine computers with no icons, right?
Right,
It
it's
just
impossible.
becomes the basic paradigm for the thing. But at the time that he adopts it, it was seen as like a pie in the sky thing that another company like threw away because it would never work out, they thought. But he decides because he's got the psychedelic difference in his mind that that's what he's going to go for. And that was the kind of thing that he felt that psychedelics did for him.
I think, didn't he famously do LSD on a trip to India at some stage? Didn't he go to India a few times?
He did. Yeah, it was part of his whole like sort of kind of like hippie trying to find yourself thing, like go to India, do some acid, smoke some pot. And so he had this whole like sort of like counterculture influenced like upbringing only to then become this big like sort of like tech maverick
Yep,
guy.
yeah. I rode a motorcycle all the way around India for 54 straight days and almost died every day. That was enlightening.
Yeah, it sounds terrifying but enlightening, yes.
I was completely sober the whole time. Oh,
Probably for the best. You probably wouldn't have made it back if you weren't.
yeah, the roads were tough sober, let alone you can grab that. It's okay. Yeah, the roads were tough sober. I don't think I could have ridden on a Indian highway high on LSD. That's for sure.
Oh no, absolutely. That'd be a death sentence, man.
Yeah. So, where are you going with this book? Like, you've put together I mean, it's beautiful. And it's substantial. Like you've written a long book and you've put in all the antidotes and all the references and everything like that. You've got like a 350, 400 page book here. Like, is it done? Is this chapter 1? Are you going to make another one? Like,
I certainly had
what's next?
there were certainly plenty of other people who could have made the cut, but I had to at some point I just wanted to make it a reasonable length thing and not try and be all encompassing because there's enough good stories for I don't know, another book like this.
Yeah, for sure.
Like that definitely this is a big accomplishment, but it is by no means the end of a journey. This is just I hope to be going a lot further with this material and with this subject matter because it is just so interesting and there is so much rich, fertile terrain here. Um, I guess some of my biggest goals are to both send the message that, drugs are tools. They're not like inherently good or bad. There's not an inherent moral element to using them. It's much more about like how people use them, what they use them for. Um, and so it's much more about how drugs function in society and how they're used than it is about whether they're inherently good or bad. And I also just want people to get the sense of, hey, like learning is tons of fun. This is going to be an educational but also really entertaining journey, and stay tuned because it's not over yet.
That's wild. I think this topic is so useful right now because I think there's like so much misinformation out there around drugs, especially like around the opioid crisis and fentanyl, like just the way drugs are being used. Like so I was doing a deep dive a while like Netflix came out with all these really like sensationalized dramas about the opioid crisis in America, right? And and I don't know, like obviously the opioid crisis in America is a massive, massive problem. But I also did a bit of a deep dive myself, and I realized like one of these companies, I won't say which one because there were a bunch of them making opioids. It wasn't just one company, but one of these companies realized that the opioids were being abused because they were being obtained by customers from their doctors, and instead of ingesting them, which is how they were designed. And when you ingest them, they're designed to release a certain amount of opioid.
Delayed release.
Yeah, over 6 or 8 or 10 hours or something like that, so that you get that pain relief and it maintains itself.
Yeah,
And then what people were doing, which was abusing the way that they were supposed to be made, is that they were crushing them and snorting them. And instead of getting that high over a 6 or 8 hour period to alleviate pain,
yeah,
they were getting a massive high in 30 minutes, and it was killing people.
exactly.
Yeah. So here you have the company that went out and actually created an opioid pill that couldn't be crushed,
Yeah,
and it had to be ingested. And here is a and these kinds of stories don't make the news at all. So again, here you have a drug that was made for post-surgery severe pain,
yeah,
which is a good thing,
yeah.
that was being misused massively. So again, it's not about whether a drug is inherently good or bad, but it's a tool that can be used for good and evil. I really like this narrative that you're on, and I think that it's great to show that all these historical figures use drugs for good and bad, and at different times of their life. I think it's a great topic of conversation.
Absolutely, and that brings up such a good point about how, education and awareness is key, 'cause, like, it ties perfectly in with the theme of drugs as tools as well, 'cause th they saw that that was a tool that was easy to abuse, and it was easy for that tool to hurt people, so they added a safety precaution that made it less likely to harm people. Like, it doesn't remove the chance altogether, but I mean, like, seat belts don't stop all car accidents, but they sure as heck make them a lot safer. Like, seat bags, like, seat belts, airbags, all the stuff that they have in cars. It's still dangerous to be driving, several thousand pounds of metal around,
Mhm.
and the potential for serious accident there is huge. But with the technologies we've got with backup cameras and stuff like that, there are so many ways to take something that has inherent danger and to make it safe in a way where people can use it on a mass level throughout society and have that function on a social level.
Yeah, no, you're right. It's funny. Like I'm so amazed at like the pharmaceutical industry specifically
Yeah.
because I always feel like these people make these pharmaceutical painkillers or whatever, for the most serious of pain,
Yeah.
and then all of a sudden people figure out it works really well, and it feels really good. And then all of a sudden you add in a decade and a couple 100,000 people doing marketing, and then all of a sudden, instead of like post-surgery pain, now it's being prescribed for headaches and menstrual pain.
Yeah.
It's like again, the drug is being completely misused for its intended consequences, and somehow, and then all of a sudden you have what's known as an epidemic, or you have,
Yeah.
and people are dying left, right, and center, and you've got massive addiction problems. Like, I think this is such a crazy situation here, the way drugs are marketed.
Yeah. No, no, absolutely. It is.
Do you ever touch any of that kind of stuff in your book?
In terms of like how, what do you mean? Like in terms of how industries promote different
Mm.
so a lot of that stuff is a bit trickier because a lot of the more so a lot of the more recent opioid epidemic stuff where we actually know what the drug companies are planning, that stuff is a little trickier to actually get the, like, oh, is this a smoking gun type thing? But we can see the effects on people
Sure.
pretty easily and how a good example of the whole prescription drug abuse thing is Elvis Presley. Because Elvis did not realize that he was a drug addict despite being severely addicted to the drugs for years and years and years.
Tell me you have an Elvis chapter.
Oh, yes, there is an Elvis chapter.
Nice.
And that's the thing, like, Elvis, he starts out as this clean-cut kid, you know, he's not into any kind of, any substance use or anything. But he gets drafted into the military, right? He decides that he's gonna serve in the military, and his commanding officers in the military are telling him what is a widely accepted practice in the military at the time, where they're saying, "Hey, man, you wanna have energy, you wanna be able to, like, go, you wanna be a soldier? Amphetamines, man. You take speed. This is what will make you the soldier that you wish that you were." And so he starts taking a bunch of amphetamine pills, which, of course, are given to him by military doctors.
Fuck, really?
It's not like it's illegal. This was no, his doctors were like, "This will help you, like, you know, it will reduce your need for food and sleep and give you." This was normal at the time. And so he comes back hooked on pills, and as he starts doing more and more shows, while he's doing all these crazy gyrations on stage, he's, like, traveling so they start giving him sleeping pills and painkillers and other all kinds of other medications.
Something to take him up, something to bring him
Something to
down.
take him, yeah, exactly. And so he ends up taking all kinds of pills that have, you know, amphetamines, barbiturates, opioids, whatever, all kinds of hard drugs in them. But from in his mind, he thinks, no, a doctor wouldn't give me anything that would hurt me. Doctors help you. That's their whole job. So I clearly can't have a drug problem because everything that I got from a doctor. And meanwhile, if Elvis found out that, like, one of his, like, backup people was, like, smoking pot, he'd chastise them. He'd be like, "No, man, don't smoke that reefer. That's bad news, man." Like, he'd
Really, at the same time as he was pill popping.
at the same time that he was, like, popping tons of, like, hard drugs in pill form, he would very much be like, "Oh, if you're getting, you know, you're buying marijuana on the streets, that's a no-no."
Like I saw the Elvis movie with that came out a couple years
Yeah,
ago, and that was a wonderful movie. Austin Butler was the
yeah.
played Elvis, and it was amazing. And then I also remember, I also and also remember the story of Michael Jackson who overdosed on drugs as well.
Yeah.
And it's interesting how the manager plays like the role in these famous people dying, because you're right. Like it's funny, like Elvis didn't even really acknowledge that these were drugs that he was using. They're just given to him by his doctor because his manager got the doctor and the doctor gave him to the manager. And it was like the same thing with Michael Jackson. Like by the end of it, he was taking drugs to wake up in the morning, drugs to go to sleep at night, and it was all just the manager just trying to keep him going.
Oh, absolutely, yeah, both Elvis's doctor and his manager were primarily were not focused on what is the healthiest thing for Elvis. It's how do we have Elvis keep making all his commitments? How do we keep having him show up on stage and being everywhere that he's supposed to be? Like, so they're entirely focused on how do we ensure that he performs reliably? And by the end, they're just drugging him up to ridiculous levels, and eventually it no longer works, and people start to realize, "Oh my god, you're falling apart." And it ultimately contributes to his death because he's got so many opioids and stuff in his system constipating him that he dies in the toilet.
Yeah.
He can't go to the bathroom properly and, like, strains and it over he's it's a terrible, ignominious way to go, and it happened because he got so hooked on the drugs without realizing it that he just lost himself.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Has there been any like really famous world leaders that have been hooked on drugs that you've found, like other than Marcus Aurelius, and anything kind of in the last like 150 years or so where we recognize, because I think some of the founding fathers of the United States were
Well,
pretty big on
several
drugs.
presidents were heavy drinkers.
Yeah.
Like, probably a big example very recently was Richard Nixon had a severe drinking problem,
Oh,
like
really?
a really bad drinking problem. When he was stressed, it got worse. But to give you an idea of how bad his drinking problem is, so he would routinely.
Does Richard Nixon have a chapter?
He does. Yes. Richard Nixon is in there for just being a giant alcoholic.
Get this book.
Thank you. Thank you. But yeah, Nixon is in there for being a giant and terrifying alcoholic in that. So he would. It's like, okay, the Vietnam War isn't going how he likes. He's getting investigated, and so he would just get really, like, almost blind drunk and call up his cabinet members in the middle of the night and be, "Hey, let's nuke Cambodia." Like, Nixon would just get up and order, like, nuclear bombs to be dropped on countries while he was out of his mind drunk. And so
That's way more serious than just calling your ex-girlfriend.
I know, right? Yeah, it's real bad when the guy who's drunk dialing has the nuclear codes. So and is, like, angry enough to use them. And so you'd have you'd have the guy standing around be, okay, so he's very obviously drunk right now, but he's also the president. Do we listen to this or not? And they'd have to have Kissinger would call them and say, "Listen, we'll just wait for him to sober up in the morning. I doubt he will even remember this." And sure enough, that's how they pretty much did it. They would just wait for him to, like, not be drunk in the morning. But yeah, like, the way Kissinger put it, like, if the president had his way, there would be a nuclear war every day.
Wow. Can you imagine having to not listen to the president of the United States because they're so inebriated? And we're like, okay, guys, whatever he just said in the last couple hours, ignore it. We'll reconvene in the morning.
Oh no, no, yeah, it is. Yeah, no, it's terrifying to realize how someone can just get in that position and be just so dangerously and it's. I mean, you're certainly in a bad position when the person to be the voice of peace and restraint and order is Henry Kissinger.
Mm.
Like, if the guy who's being like, "Hey, let's all be cool, take it easy, don't do anything we'll regret later." If that guy, if you need Henry Kissinger to be that guy,
Mhm.
you are really out of control. Like,
That's the truth, man. That's crazy. I didn't know that he was like a total blackout drunk.
yeah, no, he had like a severe stress drinking problem. Um,
Well, that's the worst because the presidency is such a stressful process.
exactly.
Like you're dealing with like world-changing problems every day for 4 years.
Oh yeah, yeah, and it definitely, like, Nixon was already the kind of guy who's like who's very bitter and likes to think about how all the people who've done him wrong are still out there late at night.
Mhm.
So it definitely did not. He would just get more and more, like, resentful and bitter as he drank.
That's wild. So I took this American history class in university at the University of Toronto, and
Yeah.
sadly I can't remember my professor's name, but he was fantastic. And he did his PhD thesis on how the office of the presidency in the United States, and that the way the presidents are treated, leads presidents to kind of become insane. And he wrote like that they have like by the time they leave office, they can potentially have like some pretty serious mental health issues because everything is taken care of you. Like you wake up in the morning, you have the same breakfast, you tell your chef exactly how you want to eat, exactly how you want your toast. You don't need to ever have to drive anywhere. You don't need a bank account. You never have to pay a bill. This whole life, this whole like regular things that we do in a daily life, the president doesn't have to do any of it. So they're just in this complete bubble. And apparently, like his thesis was, being in this bubble for an extended period of time can really like reduce your mental health significantly.
I mean, that makes sense. It is very detached from the baseline human experience. Like, what you're experiencing if you are the president is so far outside what is normal for anyone else, even the people around you, because they have such a different, like, their role in the system that sustains you is so different. Obviously, the person who's, like, cooking the president's food is gonna have a very different sense of what it's like than the president himself.
Mhm.
And the whole thing just, I mean, power can make people extremely weird. Like, power corrupts, yes, but even if power doesn't outright corrupt, power can make people extremely bizarre and give them. If you are wealthy and powerful enough, you don't really have to solve your massive personal problems because you can just pay people to do stuff for you. So you can be borderline dysfunctional as a human being, but if you have enough wealth and power, you can just kind of muddle through.
Mhm.
And so it's disturbing to see what happens to people who start out normal, but then they get in this position where they have that kind of power and just deteriorate. Howard Hughes is an example of that, and it was in
Ooh,
my book.
you got a Howard Hughes chapter?
Got a Howard Hughes chapter.
How good was that movie with Leo and, who else was in that movie? You remember,
I didn't see the whole thing, but I've seen like the part where he's just washing his and he can't stop washing his hands.
yeah.
Like a guy asks him for like a guy asks him for a paper towel, and he just looks at him and he's like, "I'm sorry, I can't." Like he is just like clearly like a mentally ill, like obsessive compulsive type guy.
Well, there's one scene where he, like, wouldn't leave his office for, like, months, and he was going to the bathroom in these jars and just putting
Oh
them
yeah,
in the
just
jar, yeah.
peeing in jars. Yeah, there was the whole thing where I believe it was the Sands Hotel where he checked into the Sands Hotel and he refused to leave, and they tried to evict him, so he bought the whole building.
Right? As you do.
Yeah, so that was the kind of thing, like, he just didn't have to be a normal person because he'd gotten so rich, and so that's the thing where the drugs come in is one of the things that he liked doing as a rich guy was he liked to fly small aircraft, right? But
Okay.
flying small aircraft is insanely dangerous,
Mhm,
that they have a way higher accident chance than big ones,
mhm.
so at one point, he I think he's flying over LA and his plane crashed and he plows through like 3 houses in Beverly Hills
Oh, shit.
before the plane like explodes with him in it. So he like catches fire and like comes out with half his body like smashed and the rest of it burnt. And a lot of the official stuff doesn't mention him taking any painkillers after that. And it's like, right, right. So the fact that he's like a bunch of people say, yeah, this guy has a codeine problem, and
Was he a drug user before the accident?
It doesn't seem like he was much of a drug user before the I mean, not anything unusual, like, he might have had, like, like, some drinks, some cigarettes, but nothing but it seems like he got in multiple different plane crashes, and this was one of the later ones that was worse, and it seems pretty clear that he developed a painkiller addiction because of how badly he was smashed and burned, and it is amazing that he survived and healed as well as he did at all.
Yeah, I can imagine because his story is, like, famous, famous.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know,
It's interesting, my my dad is, just a normal dad, but he had a hip surgery, a couple years ago, and they gave him all this Oxycontin, to heal from the surgery, and I remember he took one pill, and it made him so fucking high, he was like, "Holy shit, this is so dangerous," and I remember he told me he threw out he flushed it all down the toilet, and he's just like, "I'm just gonna bite my lip and fucking grind through this pain," because he goes, "Those pills are insanely addictive," and he noticed it right away and just was like, "Fuck it, I'm just gonna deal with the pain."
yeah, yeah, and people can get some pretty wild responses when they're badly injured and taking like pain medication. I definitely remember having like wisdom tooth surgery or something like that, and then I listened to some song while I recovered from the wisdom tooth surgery, and it wasn't a very good song, but so I thought that I had somehow died and gone to hell and the devil was singing the song to me, and it's like, oh no, this is just like kind of a crappy song. um
And you're rocket high.
so yeah, it's very easy to if you're already like not in a good way to just get super detached from reality.
Mhm.
Um and so people have different ways of dealing with that. Some people they stop taking the pain medication. Some people they keep taking it and it gets more normal after that. It really can vary a lot, but it seems pretty clear that again, he already had strange tendencies. He already clearly had some mental issues, some compulsions. But it seems pretty clear that Howard Hughes's behavior got a lot more erratic after he got in terrible plane crashes and subsequently had to be on codeine to not be out of his mind.
That's amazing. Like, you can imagine if someone has, like, if they have, like, obsessive compulsive disorder, if they suffer from depression and stuff like that, putting them on codeine or putting them on cocaine or any kind of, like, hard drug like that, that's just like dousing gasoline on a fire.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's not really a good solution there because again, it's like, here's a guy who's like, uh, a neat freak who's easily agitated, and so he's been badly burned and smashed and is all, like, bloody. So this is clearly someone who's going to be very uncomfortable no matter what happens in this circumstance.
Mhm.
So it just seemed like it was a matter of how's he going to get weird from this?
Yeah, and it is, yeah, not how, but when. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
like
Okay. So what is the main takeaway from your book here? Like, human history on drugs, you obviously highlight, people like Howard Hughes, people like Elvis. You highlight them, their stories, the kinds of drugs that they were on, the kinds of circumstances. But like after writing this entire book, what is your big takeaway on the human relationship with drugs?
Yeah, so I would reiterate that I feel that drugs are tools, so they're not inherently good or bad, and they can be used for different things. But tools is a pretty wide. I mean, because a butter knife is a tool and a chainsaw is a tool, but it's a lot easier to accidentally injure yourself with a chainsaw than it is with a butter knife. So obviously, we can't say
I'm a butter knife ninja. Sorry to interrupt you.
it's not impossible. It's just harder.
John Wick could do it.
I know, that's the thing. It's like, if you really try, you can kill someone with that butter knife, and it's like, I'm sure that you could, like, you could use the chainsaw to, like, carve a beautiful ice sculpture or something else that is completely non-destructive,
Right.
but it takes a lot more work. So, that is the kind of sense. I think there's some drugs that have more inherent danger than others. Um like, I'd say that someone, like, obviously things like chloral hydrate that aren't used widely anymore are that's for a reason. They're very dangerous. They have a high risk of toxicity, things like that. But generally speaking, drugs are not about being like, "Oh, this is like a safe thing and this is a dangerous thing." It's about, well, these things can be used in different ways, and some of them are easier to misuse than other of them. But at the end of the day, it's not about, oh, like, this substance is bad. This substance is it's about, do people know what they're doing? Why are they doing it? And are they doing it in a responsible way?
Right. The responsible way thing seems to be quite important.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the key. The same thing, because even things that can be used for very good purposes can be, it's like someone can easily overdose on the same insulin that's needed to treat diabetics, like,
Yeah.
almost anything can be bad in the right circumstances. So it's a lot more about being informed and aware, and knowing.
hmm Just in our conversation that we've had now, and I haven't read your book, sadly, but I'm going to get into it. And I thank you very much for giving me a copy. One of the things that seems to be a kind of theme just in our conversation about some of the stories that you've mentioned in your book is that it seemed like some people were using drugs knowingly,
Yes.
and then and knowing what the effects were and still using them, and then it seemed like some people were kinda using drugs not knowing how harmful they were, just thinking like they were gonna be fine at the end of it.
Yes.
And it doesn't matter whether they're, average Joe on the street or the president of the United States, like, it just seems like there's this huge spectrum of knowledge about around drugs and what is good, what isn't good,
Yeah.
and just this idea of, like, listening to other people and trusting other people.
Yeah.
It's scary, isn't it?
No, absolutely. I would say that there is a big connection between the the less aware someone is of what the drugs they take do, and what the risks are, and what the potential rewards are, the more likely things are to go wrong. I think that education is one of the best harm reduction measures, in terms of, if people have an honest and reality-based understanding of what they're getting into, then they're more able to make good decisions for themselves, or at least to minimize negative consequences.
Mhm.
Whereas people who don't know, they cannot be protected. Like, you cannot protect yourself from what you don't know is there.
Right, exactly, yeah. Are you gonna like, has writing this book made you wanna educate people more widely about drugs, or are you just really enjoying, like, the entertainment value of all these famous people in history that had these crazy drug habits?
So again, I'm hoping that it's both educational and entertaining.
That's the best kind of education.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
know, right?
Yeah.
So my goal is that that people will be more aware of, like, the safety things, and the way that these things have been, about how neither glorifying nor demonizing is the way to go forward, but rather educating people.
Mhm.
I think that is definitely a sense that I want to spread. But at the same time, I won't lie. I would love it if this got, like, adapted into something. Like, this has been a lot of fun. I did this in a large part because I love to tell entertaining stories,
Mhm.
and so those are both things. Like, I like being able to entertain people and sharing stories with them that they'll find fun, or at least interesting, even when they're not the most fun in the world. But I also do think that it is very important that if I couldn't be like a formal classroom teacher, it's nice to feel like I'm teaching in some other way.
Fuck classroom teaching. You know what you got to do is you got to find the guys that wrote Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas and write a screenplay with them and try to put some kind of narrative together around
Oh,
this.
dude, I got bad news, man. He dead.
Probably, yeah, that's
He's
true.
he's dead. So Hunter S. Thompson died, and then
Well, he didn't write the screenplay for the movie. He was the movie.
he was the hero of the book.
Yeah, yeah.
I was gonna say was that like so Hunter S. Thompson
Legend.
he writes the book. He dies, and apparently at some point before his death, he said like, hey, if I ever die, cremate me and shoot me out of a cannon.
And they did it.
And so yeah, so apparently Johnny Depp had played him in the film adaptation, and so apparently Johnny Depp, I remember because they brought it up in court. They're like, Mr. Depp, is it true that you spent $3 million like getting the ashes of Hunter S. Thompson and then firing them out of a cannon? And Johnny Depp goes, no, it is not true. I paid $5 million, not $3 million.
Brilliant, isn't it? That was such a good movie. I'm just curious, like, I'm just curious about how these stories can be again adapted, because you've done the heavy lifting, you've done the deep dive, right? But imagine, like, how do you reach more people, right? That was your whole idea. Like, you don't want to sit in a classroom with 50 kids. You want to write a book that can be read by millions. You want to maybe make a movie that can be, or
Like a TV series, like an episodic TV series with like I don't know, like with episodes based on the chapters and like
that'd be cool.
that could be totally fun. Like I
Yeah.
would love that.
This is Los Angeles.
Yeah,
This is where you have to have those dreams.
it could happen. I would love it if it did.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, what do you have coming in the next few months around the book? Do you have any like events? Are you doing any live like readings?
Yeah. So I'm actually doing. I unfortunately don't have my calendar here with me, but I've got an upcoming around the release time. I've got a reading at Book Soup.
Mhm.
And I've got several. There's some events that I'm coming in throughout the country on Zoom, and I'm doing a whole release day kind of like slate of. So I'm appearing on several different programs, and I'm doing some live. We're still planning out
Mhm.
events, but I definitely know that I am going to be doing uh a few different physical readings in the LA area. So hopefully I'm gonna have the one at Book Soup, and I'm probably gonna read like for 5 to 10 minutes from the book there, and the rest of it's gonna be a discussion type thing.
You should see if you can get into Barnes and Noble at the Grove. They have a lot of live readings and events for authors.
Yeah, no, definitely. We're still I have a really excellent publicity team who are really finding good opportunities for me. So we're trying to, um
Yeah, Kelly, she seems amazing, right?
huh?
Kelly?
Uh that's my name.
That's your name. No, who is the PR person that wrote me originally?
I don't know. I don't have the email with you.
Yeah, your last name's Kelly.
No, it's easy to get no, but I have a really good team of several people behind me.
Brilliant, brilliant.
Yeah, no,
Mm.
and so I really feel confident about our ability to reach a lot of different people.
Yeah, fantastic. This is great. And obviously I'm sure you're gonna promote all those events on your social media and
Yeah,
put all the links to
absolutely.
your
Yes.
social media and stuff like that here. That'd be great.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, what a fucking great chat. Like this was something interesting. Like I'm not a big a historian around drugs and stuff like that, but I think you're right. Like this is the kind of perfect way to educate people about history and drug use and make it entertaining and
Yeah.
fun and it's a great chat,
Yeah, my bit was it's a gateway drug to learning.
right? Yeah, I mean, learn about drugs and learn about famous people in history, and then you might want to learn a little more.
Exactly, right? Like you find out you like it. You get a taste for learning, and then you can't learn enough.
It's absolutely great. Well, look, I can't thank you enough for coming in the studios.
Absolutely, a pleasure.
We'll just go up to the big camera here so people can see we're in the same room. And next time we will coordinate the wardrobe a little better.
Yeah,
But Sam, it's great to meet
absolutely,
you.
of course, man.
And
Pleasure.
come back anytime. That was really fun.
Definitely, this was great.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you.
Fade to black.